but I think we're going to have to look at this in a different way going forward. In the past, people were saying, well, when is she going back to work? What time, is she going back to full time in the autumn? I don't think so. I think that she's probably going to have to pick and choose the way she completes her comeback, if there is a comeback in that form anyway. Things will start winding up to the more official role as Queen as time passes by. With the King, who's got a limited time in terms of he's 76 and he's going to be throwing himself into his work. That's entirely up to him. But I think that it's important that we recognise that William and Catherine will do things in their way and that it's accepted. What happened, I think, that at one stage, there was a bit of a panic afterwards. Press office weren't sure what to do. They were going to issue a joint statement that William said, well, this is sort of nothing to do with me. I mean, if I start taking responsibility, that would look odd as well. It was something that went on. It was nothing to do with me. So I think that they handled it quite well in the end. And, ultimately, with what was going on, everyone really see, to avoid a pun, there was a much bigger picture going on in all this. And when we saw her give that very courageous statement to a BBC cameraman, I thought that was amazing, how much courage she showed during that. And when she was looking down and when she was talking about her kids, I think a lot of people realised then that this was quite a vulnerable lady that was going through a hell of a lot. And then all the voices that have just been going on about racism and all sorts of nonsense, the least racist person there probably is on this earth, Catherine.
He, of course, followed all the developments of Prince Charles and Princess Diana in the 1990s for Britain's biggest tabloid newspapers. But since then, he has become an independent royal author, writing best-selling books on William, Charles, and now Catherine, the Princess of Wales. His scoops over the past decades include revealing the engagement of Charles and Camilla. So this is a man who knows everything about the British royal family. And Jobbo, congratulations. Catherine, the Princess of Wales is a #1 instant Sunday Times bestseller.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled, slightly overwhelmed actually, because I haven't had I've had Sunday Times bestsellers, but not a #1 since Diana Closely Guarded Secret, which was a book I wrote with Diana's bodyguard, Ken Wolfe. So I'm pretty thrilled. It just shows you how popular the princess is, and with everything that's been going on, how important she is to the royal family. I mean, I actually did start it about 2021 when the publisher came to me with the idea. I was keen to do more on another book on Charles, or extend a book on Charles, and actually stopped doing it whilst I was looking at that book, Our King, and then all the transition that went through, and then came back to it about 8-9 months ago. So yeah, so luckily I had been preparing and doing the work on it, because the timing on it is quite important, I think.
And I guess with everything that's happened, Jobbo, we should start right now and then work backwards, actually, because there remains so much concern about Catherine. Obviously not to the same extent as earlier in the year. She made the incredible return at Trooping the Colour. It was brilliant to see her looking healthy at Wimbledon as well. But is she okay, Jobbo, from what you know, and is she going to be okay?
Well, obviously I don't have access to medical records and things like that. From people we speak to, I think she is making a solid recovery. But I think we're going to have to look at this in a different way going forward. In the past, people were saying, well, when is she going back to work? What time, is she going back to full time in the autumn? I don't think so. I think that she's probably going to have to pick and choose the way she completes her comeback, if there is a comeback in that form anyway. I think that what you find with anybody that's had a life-changing experience like this is that they really do realise how precious life is, and that their most important things for Catherine and William will be their young children. It's a very young family. William, who was absolutely crestfallen by not only the news of his dad, the King, but of course then his wife being diagnosed with having to go through this treatment as well. Look, I think that they've earned the right to sort of work out how they want to do this. And I think that Catherine will be prioritising her family and supporting William. Obviously, she'll continue doing work with her patronages, But I don't think we're going to have a laid out stream of engagements in front of us, and then if she can't make one, then there's a big drama about it. That'll be a mistake by the PR team. I think they should just let people know gradually when the engagements are, and so that's when she's feeling up to it, and when she's cleared it with the doctors. Very important that she takes her time. Very important that she's able to. The press have a different way of a different level of expectation in the way that they're going to handle the princess.
And so the public should expect, and I know viewers of this channel, Robert, are incredibly supportive of the princess and quite disgusted actually by so much of the coverage that she had to face, and the Sussex squad coming at her and Christopher Boozy coming at her and the American mainstream media coming at her. It really was revolting. But I guess what you're saying is that we need to expect for some time Catherine won't be a traditional working royal. She might take on the odd duty, but most of it, for a while at least, will be down to William.
Well, the difference really, Dan, is that for her, it's a question of things will start winding up to the more official role as Queen as time passes by. With the King, who's got a limited time in terms of his, he's 76 and he's going to be throwing himself into his work. That's entirely up to him. But I think that it's important that we recognise that William and Catherine will do things in their way, and that it's accepted because, they are still young. They are still parents to very young children, and they've got a lot to do in terms of making sure that those children are prepared for what they've got to face going forward. And I think Catherine plays a pivotal role in that because, after all, she is a princess of the people. Her granddad was a painter and decorator. On her mother's side, she went to work on a double-decker bus. Unlike say William, who was born a prince, and all of her children were born princes and princesses, and her father-in-law were born to be kings. So she's an important person as the glue, the connection between, I think, the general public for an unelected institution that, after all, depends upon its relationship with the general public and serving the general public. And that's why I think that sense of, I'm not saying that the King and the Prince William and the Prince Wales are like touch with the general public, but they've never had to worry about a mortgage. They've never had to worry about what job they're going to do. They've never had to do anything like that. And although Catherine has been extremely privileged, I think that she has the knowledge of an understanding of basically her grandparents on her mother's side's experience, and indeed her parents were self-made people. So look, I think she's so important and so precious that the royal family will have to sort of, in a way, dance to her tune rather than people. The court is all expecting it all to happen in a way that it has done in the past.
Yeah, exactly. We are prepared now to wrap her up in cotton wool. She can appear when she wants, when she feels comfortable. I actually think that's really important. And William has been working pretty hard, actually, given that for a long time he was also looking after the family too. But Jobbo, can we talk about those few weeks when the world seemed to turn against Catherine? I know we spoke about it privately at the time. Kensington Palace did struggle to deal with it, really, because, of course, Catherine knew that what she was facing was much more serious than the public knew, but the narrative almost got out of control, and then it led to, I think, a hysterical reaction when she posted a picture that was photoshopped. But do you feel there have been learnings from Catherine and William about how to deal with those types of situations? I was actually really heartened to see that she's still releasing her own pictures of Prince George. And were they bruised by that experience? Because it was brutal. It was probably the first time, really, that the world, or at least the mainstream media, turned on William and Catherine, even though it was incredibly unfair. And within a few days, they were all going to have massive egg on their face, and there was huge backpedaling going on.
Well, look, I think the problem is that ever since we've had the Meghan and Harry nonsense going on of the one side being pitted against the other, you've always got these trolls. I mean, for some reason at the moment, people seem to think that and I'm a pretty fair journalist, I think, and writer over the years, somehow sided with the Sussexes. I don't know what they've been reading. I really don't. I mean, I think it seems utterly ridiculous. And perhaps people should read a book before making a comment about it. But what I would say about the Catherine situation, that was a mistake by Kensington Palace Press Office. the fact was that photograph that was doctored was issued by the palace as an official picture. That cannot happen, because how can you then trust what is being issued, and what is real, what isn't real? It's very important that official areas, from Downing Street to the Foreign Office to the royal family, issue things that are legit. It doesn't matter if it's a slightly odd picture. The mistake was, of course, is that they've been used to put it out on their social media. Now, if they issue it on their social media, I don't really have a problem with that, because that's a social media issue. But if it's going through an official photograph, then I think it has to be clear as day, not doctored, because otherwise you don't know what's right and wrong. And I addressed that a little bit in the book. And yeah, look, I think it was a mistake. I think the mistake was by the palace press office, not by her.
And Jobbo, what does it say about Catherine that she took responsibility? She didn't throw her aides under the bus. She didn't throw William under the bus. She posted that message and she took it all on herself.
Well, they're very honest, I think, that really the Welleses. I mean, what happened, I think, that at one stage, a bit of a panic afterwards. Press office weren't sure what to do. They were going to issue a joint statement that William said, well, this sort of nothing to do with me. I mean, if I start taking responsibility, that would look odd as well. It was something that went on. It was nothing to do with me. So I think that they handled it quite well in the end. And, ultimately, with what was going on, everyone really see, to avoid a pun, there was a much bigger picture going on in all this. And when we saw her give that very courageous statement to a BBC cameraman, I thought that was amazing, how much courage she showed during that. And when she was looking down and when she was talking about her kids, I think a lot of people realised then that this was quite a vulnerable lady that was going through a hell of a lot. And then all the voices that have just been going on about racism and all sorts of nonsense. The least racist person there probably is on this earth, Catherine. Yet she's been accused of it. I think that the mistake was made by the palace, and the palace have learned a lot from that. Kensington Palace, that is, and they really, I think, really had to take more responsibility for it. Catherine, at the end of the day, is a very good photographer. She would be the first person to doctor a photograph, particularly for private use. It's just you can't do it if it's public. What we've seen, I think, in the last 6 months or so, is a lot of goodwill towards Wales. They're doing an awful lot. They're carrying the heavy load, really. William was totally crestfallen after hearing the news about his dad and then the news about his wife, but really just pulled together, got on with the job, really showed very little weakness and showed pretty little emotion, actually, in public when people were asking him quite difficult questions about his wife, which would most people, you could end up in tears almost. But the reality is he showed great strength. And, at that particular time, I thought that he rose, there cometh the hour, cometh the man. And I really think he showed us all that he's got the mettle to be the future, or to be the king.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I felt that too. Jobber, it is worth clearing up a couple of things, though, that you have raised in that answer, because there are so many... I don't like using the term conspiracy theories because I always think conspiracy theories come true. So I guess I'd just say there's so many outright lies, Jobbo, around it. So firstly, Christopher Boozy, who's this horrible sort of spiritual leader of the Sussex Squad, keeps on trying to claim that the BBC filmed video of Catherine revealing her cancer is fake, and that the images and the video of Catherine and William arriving at the farm shop and leaving the farm shop, which were published in The Sun and TMZ, seemingly with the tacit approval of Kensington Palace to reassure the world, that they are fake as well. Can you just clear that up, Jobbo?
Well, they're just not. I mean, I don't know where these people get off. I mean, really, the photographs seems to be quite clearly not fake. They were obtained, and The Sun published them, and they're not fake. And really, the other one is just bizarre claims. And why would that be fake? The BBC video. I mean, there was a BBC cameraman was brought in. They did that specifically to avoid such nonsense, I think, of people saying, "Oh, who filmed what?" There is a cameraman, and I'm sure if he had to swear an affidavit, he would. But he's from the BBC. He was brought in, did the filming, and that was that.
Yeah, but I think that's really important. I think
that is. But I think these people really are quite mad, actually. I mean,
They're losing the
they
plot.
do things, they say things that are completely nonsense, and they don't even read anything properly. They sort of have their own agendas, which, unfortunately for them, the voices are becoming less of a worry. What's when you've experienced something like this? I've had friends who've experienced cancer treatment. I think Catherine and the King, all these things, just they just ignore the noise now. And I think that's the point, really. They're just a sort of less important noise to Sussex people. And in fact, in America, they're less relevant. I mean, they're desperately trying to become more relevant in America, but the royal family over here, they're really not bothered. I mean, the King, if he does take Harry's calls, it's very rarely. The main concern is when the money runs out, what they're going to do, because they obviously come cap in hand to the King, and that's not going to help them. I think that really what's happened with this, both the diagnosis for the King and for Catherine, is that people realise just how important they are, their courage they've shown, and all the drama that goes along with Meghan Markle and with Harry is just not even worth listening to.
First, though, what's so important about being independent is I'm only ever going to tell you about products that I use and truly believe in, and Verso is one of them. I've entered my 40s, so staying healthy is really important to me. I exercise virtually every day, wasn't very good over the weekend, had a few drinks, but usually I'm doing the 16-8 fast. I have lost weight. However, scientists like David Sinclair have proven we can now reverse aging with interventions that go beyond healthy habits. So I wanted a product that I knew would enhance everything I was already doing, one that's backed up by solid evidence. I cannot tell you how good Cell Being by Verso is. That's the name of the product, Cell Being. It has scientifically proven ingredients that fight the effects of aging. It does that by increasing the NAD plus levels. Now, NAD plus, that's the thing that powers every cell in your body. For me, the product has been transformative. Fasting is so much easier. I've lost fat. I'm eating less too. And that's because it has blood sugar regulating effects in the product, which actually lead to fewer cravings. It really helps with sleep too and energy. So this is a brilliant anti-aging product. The really helpful thing to know too is that Verso publishes third-party testing from each batch produced to guarantee you are getting what you paid for. And I'm very excited to say an amazing offer today. If you head right now to buy.ver.so/outspoken, you will save 15% on your first order. All you need to do is use the coupon code OUTSPOKEN. The link is available in our YouTube and Rumble description. But to repeat, bui.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code OUTSPOKEN. Now, you've seen two very different couples, haven't you? And thank God the future of the royal family is in the hands of one of them. But Jobbo, on just one other thing that I think is important actually for you to be able to clear up, because I've seen some of this too, and I think it's really difficult sometimes as journalists. Look, we are supportive of the royal family. We think William and Catherine are great, but it is our job to report stories and to report the truth. That isn't always going to be perfectly varnished. And what that sometimes leads to is, as you say, people falsely accusing you of turning on William and Catherine in some way and siding with the Sussex squad. But I think the main thing for you that seems to be picked up online is because there are these photos of you alongside Omid Scobie. But I thought it was important to clear up the fact that that is because you are both paid by ABC, the broadcaster in the US, to be royal contributors for their coverage.
I know where that photograph was taken, actually, because Omid hasn't really been doing an awful lot for ABC's. I'm an official, at the time, he was an official contributor for ABC. So was I, but the reason that we were both working for the same contributor is because they wanted different points of view. I'm largely am supportive of the British monarchy, I'm constructively critical, and at that time, Omid was pretty critical, but they wanted that different voice. They also have Victoria Murphy, who's another voice, but when it came to covering state occasions such as the coronation, it was myself and Victoria that were in the chair. So yeah, that photograph was taken outside St Paul's Cathedral when Harry and Meghan turned up at St Paul's. So quite weird that somebody even bothered to take that photograph. Quite weird even that they could then suggest that I'm in cahoots with Omid. I mean, I've had to, if anybody cares to watch any of the things that have been screened, he might say one thing and I'll say completely the other point of view, So I don't have a particular problem with the guy, but at the end of the day, it's not nothing personal. But we're not mates, and certainly, I don't agree with pretty much 95% of what he says. So, at the end of the day, as a journalist, you try to get as close to the truth. I've done that for 35 years. It's not always that easy, but along the way, as you say, I've broken stories that came out before even the Prime Minister knew, like the Charles to marry Camilla. I knew before the Prime Minister had been told by the Queen. So, look, I'm very happy that in the way I cover stories. But somebody taking a photograph of me and Obi together, and as if we're sort of blood brothers, is a bit ridiculous. We both had, at this time, I've still got a contract with ABC and one of their contributors on the royal family. I don't know his position, with them anymore. I really wouldn't care to be honest. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm still working.
If you were asked to broadcast along someone by ABC who you're working for, of course you're going to do that.
It's quite normal, isn't it, to have people with different viewpoints for a big network like that. It's quite normal. It happens in the British networks that they'll pit one person against another and just get the different viewpoints. But as I say, that said, I don't have a problem with the guy. Not far from it.
And then I guess the other criticism was, Jobbo, which you've already cleared up, which I think is important too, is that you had been working on this book for a long time. This wasn't something that you wrote specifically because Catherine had been diagnosed with cancer.
To be fair to me, it was in 2021. If people want to see the contracts, they can. Parminder Mann, who was the CEO of Bonnie Books, and I had a lunch. I was going along because I wanted to develop my Charles at 70 book, which eventually did happen, as Our King, because I had loads more information that I felt was relevant. But she went, no, I'd like, as a working man myself, she thought, I'd really like to get to know a bit more about the enigma that is Catherine, this amazing woman. She's immaculate. She has these young children. She worked hard with the royal family. And yet, how does she do it? To just try and get some understanding of who she is and where she comes from, rather than this sort of tabloid stream at that time. It was quite a lot of tabloid nonsense going on. One side or the other, the Fab Four, and all these sort of stories that really aren't, they weren't true, really. There was nothing fab about that four. They were two couples, very much not on the same wavelength. So really, that's what happened. I signed a contract back in 2021, and a lot has happened in the royal family since 2021. But I was able to, go through quite a lot of the backstory, did a lot of research, spoke to various people. I had lots of people to speak to. A lot of people. Uncle Gary Goldsmith, he was there at the launch party. We had a load of different people at the palace. So all I would say is that a book of this type, a biography of 85,000 words or so, you just can't write turn it around since there's been some announcement. Obviously, the announcement starts the book because that actually got announced literally as we were going to press. So I had to then obviously keep changing things and try to make it as up to date as possible. But that wasn't the premise of the book. It certainly wasn't the basis of the book. It was just something that happened towards the end of when we were going to press. Unfortunately, for the completeness of the book,
of course,
we were able to include and keep it as up to date as possible.
Of course, but I just thought it was really important to clarify you'd been working on this book for a long time. And there are so many fascinating revelations that only a true insider would be able to break with authority. I want to talk to you about a few of them, but the first actually is a little bit relevant to one of the comments you made previously and something we've covered a lot here on Outspoken, Jobbo. So there's this increasing concern, and look, some people would say it's a paranoia, but within certain members of the royal family and certain courtiers, that they're very worried that Harry and Meghan still haven't totally given up on the idea of one day being part of the royal family again. And of course they remain, or Harry remains, in the line of succession. And you reveal an anecdote in the story, and this is something I had heard about as well, that the Queen and Charles had actually clashed with William because he was refusing, I mean, you'll tell it better, but effectively he was refusing to not travel with his entire family, both in planes and
It's more that, yeah.
helicopters.
I mean, basically, it's all about his helicopter. No one's doubting that Prince William is a very, very good helicopter pilot, very skilled both with the RAF and the air ambulance before. And so he's an exceptionally good pilot. But the Queen in particular was very concerned about, to start with anyway, about this, and raised it with William because he was flying from Kensington Palace at that time up to Anmer Hall, where the kids would sort of be there for weekends, etc., with the entire family. Now, the Queen, I remember, I think one of the days was the Chelsea Flower Show. When she arrived in that buggy thing, and she'd had a conversation with Prince William then, and basically said, look, not in a bad way, but look, I don't like it because you have to think of the line of succession, and one must remember that if something terrible happened, and we've seen terrible incidents with helicopters, from the chairman of Leicester City to the football supporting guy, Matthew Harding, to government people that have been, helicopters have crashed. So the Queen in particular was always haunted by the death of one of her pilots from the Royal Flight who died in an air crash. And so she said, you have to think of the line of succession. Well, the line of succession would mean that Harry and Meghan, if something happened, would be the next king and queen. And William was understandably he was confident that he knows what he was doing and does all the checks. The king, obviously with his issue with cancer, obviously he's raised the same issue. And my understanding is that one of the palace courtiers, I think it might have been the Keeper of the Privy Purse, had to, on the king's instruction, had to go and see William and say, look, you need to sign this disclaimer. And I think that seems a bit strange. People say, well, what difference would that make? Well, if you have to sign a document saying it's your responsibility, it probably is quite a clever thing to do by the king because it's focusing your mind on what you're actually doing. In fact, you have to sign that signature. I don't know what good it would do, if something terrible like that happened. I don't know if they're going to suddenly release, well, I told him so. But the fact is, I think it's more about focusing William's mind on the dangers and the implications of flying with George, Charlotte and Louis, and of course the princess, in particular George, Charlotte and Louis, because of the implications it would have in terms of the line of succession.
But my understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, is that he is still flying, well, maybe not the helicopter, but he's still taking flights with George, which feels...
This was specifically about the helicopter.
Okay.
Specifically
rather than commercial flights.
Rather than commercial flights, because he went to the England matches, with George. So no, I think this is about helicopters and helicopters.
Yeah. Is there this genuine concern about the idea of King Harry and Queen Meghan?
Well, I don't think people should. I don't think the king or anybody in this country who supports the monarchy should take things for granted. And we've just seen an awful lot of unrest on the streets of Great Britain, and where people are from various different communities are clashing over various things. Politicians beware, royal family beware. So if you take the general public for granted, they might not agree. Now, at the moment, if something terrible like that happened, and God forbid it never happened, God forbid it happens, but you cannot take the general public's reaction for granted. And a lot has gone under the water's gone under the bridge. It's Prince Harry making all sorts of allegations and claims that have upset a lot of people, both in the military and the general public, and have done things that people don't agree with. And Meghan herself has made all sorts of claims. Now, to suddenly, after they've said we're not already interested in Great Britain, or we're almost prepared to do his work part-time for Great Britain, to then suddenly be thrust onto the throne, I don't think there'll be a very warm reaction to that at all. I don't think even the royalists will find that acceptable. And I think there will be a lot of unrest about that. And so surely someone needs to clarify this line of succession once and for all now, because although we are in a position where we have the Wales' children, all underage, at this time, but if something happened to William, then there would have to be a regency. Now that needs to be clarified for starters, until William's children are of age. So I think there's too much that's unresolved. As it lies, it would be then after Harry and Meghan say that they suddenly got thrown out, then who's next? Well, who is next is Prince Andrew.
Which is a problem too.
Let's sort of be real here. The royal family can't, particularly when we've seen the Council of the King and things like this, and we've got a helicopter flying Prince William. These sort of things should be clarified. And personally, in my opinion, at this moment in time, I would, if I was the king, and I'm never going to be that, but I would say that that Princess Anne should be appointed as a special person to be the regent if anything happens to William.
And she
the
could
reason
guide
I say that is
George
because
through.
I think she'd be the one person who would be accepted. Technically, of course, Edward is above her, and Edward's Sophie, and probably people wouldn't have a problem with that. But the one person I think the most of this country respects is the Princess Royal, and I think the connection with the late Queen, and being such an important role, I think, with the King, nobody would argue with that.
Oh God, no! But Harry wouldn't he? I mean, would he have a
Well,
right
I think Harry would
to become
definitely,
regent?
and he would say, "I'm the next in line." And technically, because nothing has been done about this, technically, so could the Duke of York.
I mean, this is why I think it's so insane.
No, but then it would go to Beatrice and Eugenie, who are not even working royals. So how on earth should this be left unsaid? I just think it shouldn't be left unsaid.
Well, it shouldn't. And also, though, just back to your original scoop, this is why it's so important. And I understand that William and Catherine are desperate to give their children a normal life, right? And so a normal life means if you go on holiday, if you go to an event, you want to fly with your mum or dad. But surely, Jobbo, that's just insanity. I mean, look, planes do crash. Obviously, we pray it never happens. It's very unlikely. But do not take the risk of leaving the royal family in the hands of Harry and Meghan. That would be my
I would just say follow the example of late Majesty, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who used to go to Norfolk fairly regularly. It was even towards the end of her life, we went to Wood Farm and had a period of reflection. She went there by train. She got a train.
Yeah, exactly. Safety first, because there is so much at stake. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.